Victor, I understand that before becoming a full-time professional yoga teacher, you were actually in the corporate world.
Yes, I am. I was in the corporate world. I was working as a marketing manager for an American company.
And what made you decide to make the transition?
Well, it was a difficult decision, and I guess like many other yoga teachers, when we first decided to become a full-time yoga teacher, um, we really have no idea how difficult this was. But having said so, I was prepared to have a tremendous pay cut, definitely. But even then, we have no idea at that time. Like it will be extremely tough to go without a pay cut for a long time. Yeah, and as I took that decision and leave the company, the time seems to be very long, waiting for the next paycheck. It was the most difficult time, I must say. I tried to do more teaching after becoming a full-time yoga teacher, but the reality of that is that teaching opportunity is very little. And I guess I have the same experience, just like any other yoga teachers in any Asian countries. When we first started off, we are trying hard to look for new teaching opportunities, but that rarely comes along, and it took me like more than 2 years to really, settle down, to be a little bit more settled down after leaving the corporate world. Yeah, and even after 2 years, when I felt more stable, becoming a full-time yoga teacher, I've gone through a period of crisis where I actually sit down to contemplate whether there is any meaning for me to continue. Yeah. So, I've gone through very difficult times becoming a full-time yoga teacher.
So what advice would you give to somebody who is perhaps working a full-time job now and they finished their yoga teacher training and they're thinking, oh, I'll just become a yoga teacher. My life's going to be this wonderful adventure of teaching yoga, and it's going to be a life of leisure.
I've said this many times in my own teacher training program. First, don't leave your job because you don't like it. I think you need to have a stronger reason, a stronger motivation of why you wanted to become a full-time yoga teacher. And why would you want to share this? Because I always get people to first sit down to imagine themselves becoming a full-time yoga teacher, and maybe having to go to different clubs, different fitness center, different yoga studio at different hour of the day, just like any crazy person running around and trying to survive as a yoga teacher. And seriously, imagine that and ask yourself, how long can this be? How long can you continue leading a kind of life like this? And if there is no strong motivation, there isn't a strong reason why you would like to continue teaching yoga, it's very difficult to sustain. And again, the reality of people turning into full-time and then dropping out of teaching entirely to do something else, that happens all the time, because as I said, even for myself, I left the corporate world for 2 years, and thereafter, even as I become more stable financially, I really think about why I should continue, and I've gone through a very deep search within myself. Why is it that I have to continue to do what I'm doing? What's the meaning of that? And when we don't understand why we should continue what we are doing, we tend to give that up too quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I understand that before you got deeply into Yin Yoga, you were into more athletic styles of yoga, and you had some injuries. Can you tell us about that transition and how Yin Yoga influenced you and how it helped your
I think
development?
again, just like any other yogis who are, or new yogis who are newly coming into the yoga practice and being so enthusiastic about it, is that we tend to overdo. We tend to overdo. We tend to be over enthusiastic, and in a way that is good. And I begin like that, and I was being introduced to Hatha yoga initially, and then Ashtanga yoga came, and there was a new craze about Ashtanga yoga, and I was very much involved in Ashtanga yoga and other forms of vinyasa, dynamic yogas, and I was enjoying it, And as we are enjoying something that we do, we never really thought about that this will become a problem. Like, this is what how I spend my weekend actually. And you never thought that it will be a problem. But, after 4 years of practicing Ashtanga yoga, I began to feel that, I have some joints issue, especially on my knee and on my hamstring. And I have to relook at the way I practice yoga, Then I met Paul Briley in 2002 and first taken his training on anatomy. And he never really called it Yin Yoga at that time, but it was just a way he practices his yoga. So I experienced that for the very first time. It was really slow, really slow. I remember, like in the class, I put my heads up a few times just to see that, is everyone still in the pose or I'm the only one, So, but I felt a tremendous change in my body after 5 consecutive days of Yin Yoga and 2 hours each day, And I was just trying to understand what was going on in this body sensation, like what was that, I felt tremendously weak after that practice, and it was amazing because I go back to my hotel and I was just contemplating, but I didn't do any jump through, I did not do any handstand, headstand, whatever. I didn't do anything dynamic, but I felt so weak, like I felt that internal tiredness of my tissues. On the joints, I felt that. So I asked Paul about it, and he said that just take rest, just take rest. So that was my very first experience, and it was an entirely different experience from yoga. From yoga. So I was intrigued to understand more about this kind of yoga that doesn't move. So what is happening? Obviously there is something that is going through inside my body. And I begin to open up to him to say that I have injuries, and I have no idea what to do with it because I would like to continue my Ashtanga yoga practice. So that was then, right? So I asked him about like how should I continue this dynamic form of practice with my injury. When I look back now, at the stupidity of my mind, asking a question like that, I guess again, like I was just a normal practitioner, being very interested in yoga, not knowing that having put yourself into a state of injury, that your practice should change, but your young mind, your stubbornness in sticking to this dynamic form of practice is not going to help in any way. So he just told me that, you know, maybe you should consider to continue to practice a more yin way, you know, which is what he is doing. Um, I came back to Singapore, but I obviously it was very difficult for me to give up Ashtanga Yoga at that time. So I continued to practice Ashtanga Yoga. But every time when I do it, you know, I felt the excruciating pain in the knee and in the hamstring, and I have no idea how to get out of that sensation, you know. And then, you know, I come back to think about, like, okay, maybe I should just take it slow and do yin more. Yeah. And that's what I did. When I begin to then invest more time in yin, I begin to see that the sensations are going away, you know. And then I invested more time in yin, you know. So I begin to shift my practice, you know, from a dynamic form into a more slow and holding for a long time, relaxing the body, due to this injury. Yeah, and it was a learning process for me, but it was a very helpful process. And eventually, after 2 years of that, you know, now I have no more issue. Yeah, now the hamstring has no more issue, the knee has no more issue. Yeah, but I continue to practice Hatha Yoga. You know, I continue to do Hatha Yoga even while I am doing Yin. I just remove myself from punishing my own body to do dynamic forms of yoga. Yeah, but at this moment I'm capable to do everything. You know, I'm capable to do any form of dynamic yoga. Yeah, now that I'm fully healed. I think people that has injury, they really need to consider another way of engaging the body. Yeah, so this is important for them during this period. Yeah, the most difficult thing about removing yourself from a dynamic form of practice is not the practice itself. Yeah, but it is the mind. Yeah, the conditions, the habitual conditioning of the mind that says that, you know, only if you are doing this much, you are sweating this much, then you are in yoga. Then you have done yoga today. Yeah. Again, I have gone through that period of difficulty, you know, trying to convince myself that, you know, yin is going to help me solve the problem and not that the other kind of yoga. Yeah. So it was a difficult transition, but when I begin to see result, when I begin to understand that yin really heal, yeah, then I'm more motivated to invest my time in it. That is how eventually I shift myself from a dynamic form of yoga into the yin practice.
So I had a similar experience myself, and I know a lot of other people push themselves too hard, and hamstring inflammation especially is very common. So if somebody came to you and said, look, I really want to get flexible fast, what would you say?
I think first of all, flexibility is not really the most difficult thing, you know, when you are practicing the yoga, because people have to understand that eventually you get more flexible. Yeah, if you invest enough time, yeah, you will eventually be more flexible. The key question here is how to develop flexibility in a safe way. Yeah, so, well, when you have less space in the body, when you have less space in the joint, you have less choice on how to manipulate the body. In fact, there is not much choices how you can move, because the mobility is very much limited. Yeah. So what is happening is that if you keep pulling yourself, you know, if you keep pushing it, what are you pushing into? Well, you're pushing onto things that you do not want to push, which is your ligaments and tendon. Yeah, because that is all. Yeah, the belt of the muscles are very stiff, or the belt of the muscles are very short. So where else can you push? Yeah, when we want to work in a safe way, we want to work more into the main belt of the muscles and not the end of the tissues where it is the ligaments and the tendon. Yeah. But when you have so little space in your joint, so tight in the belt of or the belly of the muscle, where else can you push into? You only push into the tendons and the ligaments. Yeah. And that is why, you know, beginners is so susceptible to injuries, you know. Because this is exactly the same situation. I encourage people to, as a beginner, you know, or in yoga, to seriously consider working both yin and yang yoga at the same time. Yeah, you need to create space in the joint. You need to create more space in the mobility of the joints, such that when you go back into your hatha yoga classes or any kind of vinyasa class or power class, you have a greater mobility, you have a greater choice on how you can work this body. Yeah. When the joints itself have so little space, and you have no choice but to tear the muscles more, to work these muscles harder, then you are more susceptible to injuries. Yeah. Now, yin yoga is a very safe way for people to engage pose by pose. Yeah. No matter whether you are young or you are old, no one in yin yoga class has a problem following the pace of the class. Yeah. Because, you know, we take every pose 3 to 5 minutes and we change and we transit. Yeah. There isn't a pacing issue here. And this is most needed for people with injuries, for people that are extremely stiff. Yeah, it does not encourage you to go into muscular contraction and active stretching. So that is safe because we encourage you to relax more into the pose. Yeah, we work with gravity, we work with the orientation of the body. So in this way, you know, it is a safe way to slowly take time. Yeah, because time is one of the critical factors in yin yoga. Yeah, and we hold longer by relaxing the body. Yeah, and eventually the deep layers is going to move, and that is what we want. Yeah, so in yang practice, you are working more onto the belt of the muscles. In yin, we want to work into the deeper layers that is surrounding the bones. So you have, if you are doing both at the same time, you are having a yang practice, but you are having a yin practice to complement what you do, then you find that you have external mobility and internal mobility.
Great. So people who are more interested in the spiritual side of yoga, how would you compare an active, more athletic asana practice to the experience of stillness in yin yoga?
So, first of all, you would notice, and you probably seen many people that has claimed that they have years of yoga practice, but they really have problems sitting 5 minutes. Yeah, they really have problem trying to quieting down themselves for just 5 minutes. It's even, you know, beyond their imagination to be able to sit and take a pose and just sit for a minute. Now this obviously tells us that there's something wrong with what you're doing to yourself. Yeah, something wrong about what you are practicing. Yeah, when we talk about a practice, we are talking about trying to get ourselves familiar with something. Yeah, coming back and becoming familiar with something. And what we are not connected with ourselves at this moment is to become familiar with stillness. Yeah, no, we are not familiar with stillness. We identify ourselves more with mobility, like working and action and doing more. Yeah, and we claim that as our personality, not knowing that as much as that is our personality, we have the other side. Yeah, that we have the ability to be still, we have the ability to quieting down ourselves. But when we identify only with one side of who we are, and we choose to disregard the opposite side and say that, you know, no, I cannot be still, you know, I cannot do meditation, you know, I cannot quiet down myself. So you choose to then disregard that aspect of who you are, and then choose to identify with something else. Yeah. So these are the choices. So the problem is that when your practice do not allow you to come back to recognize that nature of stillness, yeah, the nature of quieting down, then it is then difficult for you to turn inward to become spiritually more advanced, yeah, or to evolve into a more spiritual nature. Yeah. Now, yin yoga practice would be that bridge for anyone who is wanting to learn meditation, yeah, or learn about just keeping still, yeah, because the body needs to understand the nature of stillness. Yeah. The fact that we have a gross body, yeah, we need to first educate the body. Yeah. We need to educate. We need to put in a discipline to this body to make this body understand, yeah, the nature of stillness. When the body is more settled, when the body becomes still, then the energy, yeah, the pranic energy is more settled. Yeah, it's less on this moving cycle that is within. So it's more settled. And when that happens, then the mind is more settled. Yeah, because you can then be very organic with your breathing. Yeah, you don't have to, activate, your breath in a very active way, like what you would do, trying to activate in the sympathetic nervous system. So you come into the parasympathetic nervous system when we are practicing yin yoga. Yeah, so your breath becomes more organic as you become more and more still. So anybody that actually wanting to practice meditation, they should think about whether they can actually stay in a pose for 5 minutes. Yeah. Now, if you can't do that, allowing no tension of the body and allowing your breath to be organic, yeah, if you can't do that, then it will be difficult to request anyone to actually sit up and do meditation. Yeah. But when you have more ability to accumulate your 5 minutes of asana, yeah, in a very natural, organic way, to become a 60 minutes practice, yeah, then maybe, yeah, there is more ability to actually do meditation eventually. Yeah. So the practice of yin yoga is this accumulation of 3 to 5 minutes time of stillness. Yeah. And this is the discipline we are cultivating in the body to educate the body to be still. Yeah. And then eventually, that accumulate as an experience, a meditative experience. Yeah. It is very difficult if you don't have this practice as a transition. Yeah. Because you are moving all the time, and the next moment you decided to ask yourself to sit. This is definitely more difficult. Yeah, it is much more demanding. Yeah, but if you are having a practice that is always allowing you to unwind, to quieten down, and you have been disciplining yourself in that way, then doing meditation becomes natural. Yeah. What we want to experience in our meditation is not a contrived state of the body, not the contrived state of our mind, but is to allow this body to take a shape or take a form that is natural to us. Yeah. And we allow our mind to have that space, have that openness. Yeah. So it is important that we then cultivate first a quieting practice like yin yoga.
So Victor, how many times have you visited Japan?
Oh, I have visited many times. I visited when before I was a yoga teacher. So that was like maybe more than 10 years ago. Then in recent years, I come maybe about 5, 6 times. I usually come to Japan maybe 2, 3 times in a year, in recent years.
And your background is you're Singaporean Chinese.
Yes.
And how would you describe the differences between Chinese and Japanese culture?
Actually, there are so much commonalities, because I guess we all begin, the Chinese culture and the Japanese culture came from the same root, actually. And that is why it is then easy for me, to speak to Japanese with that common culture. Even in my training, I use a lot of kanji, to make them understanding the concept, when we talk about qi, it is not something that is totally unfamiliar to Japanese. Yeah. When we talk about yin and yang, it is not something that is totally complicated to Japanese. So there is that common history, yeah, and understanding of the same root that makes my teaching relatively easy here. And I think because of that, it is well accepted.
And do you find the language, in terms of the kanji, does that translate well? Is it easy for you to read signs or to write something on the whiteboard when you're teaching? Or?
Yeah, it's actually more meaningful to actually see some of the character in kanji for the Japanese people.
Oh.
It sort of like give them a deeper meaning, or a more in-depth or more accurate view of what is. So that helps a lot because of the language issue, and although I have to explain it in English, but when they look at the word, itself, it also spark a deeper layer of meaning for them. Yeah. So that is what is helping here. Yeah. When we are talking about yin yoga and the principle of yin and yang.
And what differences do you find between Japanese and Chinese cultures?
Well, the differences would be that there are many ways that the Japanese has taken the Chinese culture and developed into something unique of their own. Like, for example, tea. Yeah. Like for example, a very common food like mochi. Yeah. All these comes from China. Yeah. The Thera. Yeah. The temples here. Yeah. Again, when I visit Kyoto, it reminded so much of China history in the 7th century, because the style of how the temples are being built is back in China in the 7th century, and in fact, China at this moment has lost huge number of Thera of that kind of nature. They have been destroyed mostly. Yeah, the pagodas that was built mainly in Kyoto. It was the style of the 7th century in China. But today, if you try to find one in China, it's very difficult. Yeah. So when I see how Japanese are applying it into like calligraphy, tea ceremony, every part of that culture, from what they wear, to the language itself, there is that root that is coming back from the Chinese culture. But yet, again, they have their own interpretation. Yeah, they have kept a lot of the tradition, where the Chinese today, they are, they've forgotten. They are no longer practicing them. Yeah. Probably they don't even know that it originates from China, and they think that that's Japanese. So this is the weird part, And when you study China history, and you look back at that relationship, the cross culture, from the Buddhist aspect, yeah, from the relationship of the dynasty kings, you know, and the samurais or the kings in Japan. There is a lot of that relationship that was going on back in the 7th century. So many things, including great Chinese philosophy, kept entirely in kanji by Japanese. Yeah, Buddhist texts kept entirely by Japanese in kanji, and these are lost in China actually, which was later discovered by Chinese scholars. You know that they don't have that, and they have to come back to Japan to look for them, and then they bring it back to China. Yeah, so especially Buddhism. Yeah, in many cases. Yeah, Buddhist texts was entirely lost in China, you know, but was later discovered that it exists in Japan, and it exists in full volume, everything in kanji, you know, and then was being brought back again in China. Yeah, so I appreciate China history and China culture, and when I look at the Japanese, I understand why things are being practiced in that way. So that allows me to appreciate the culture more.
And getting back to yoga, so when we say the word yoga, I guess it's a word which comes from India, but of course in China there are many traditions of Qigong or other types of yogic practices. So with your background as being from the Chinese culture, have you, but you went to America to learn Yin Yoga, which Paul Grilly's teacher learned from a Chinese teacher. It's kind of an interesting circle. Could you talk a little about that?
Yeah, I think the word yoga originates from Sanskrit. It just conveys an idea. Yeah. It is an idea of evolution and unification of that evolution. Yeah. So the question is, does this tradition only exist in India and it is not found in any other culture? Obviously, the answer is no. Yeah. Especially when you're talking about the entire Himalayas region, many people actually forgotten that China is very much part of the Himalayas region, yeah, through the connection of Tibet, yeah, and that in even into we call the Central Asia, yeah, where the Silk Road exists, yeah. This is the entire Himalayas belt, and traditionally, there is so much interaction between China and India, yeah, due to the Silk Road and Buddhism as well. So before Buddhism came into China, there is Taoist practice. Yeah, there is a Taoist view that exists that also talk about how to bring oneself into the state of unification. Yeah, that is going beyond the polarity of yin and yang. Yeah, and then break away from this state of duality. Yeah, so this is the Taoist idea. Yeah, and in Tibet, especially, you have Buddhism that was introduced back in the 7th century again. The whole Himalayas region is populating with these yogic ideas, but different language has different names for it. Yeah, different regions and in different parts of the region, they are practicing it somewhat differently. Yeah. So in Yin Yoga, we are using the Taoist language. We are using the Taoist language. We are trying to use the Taoist understanding or the way of the Tao to view nature that is around us, and then to view this body that is a body of yin and yang, to view our practice, yeah, in this yin and yang nature. The whole idea is to understand that polarity exists and it keeps on evolving and changing. Yeah, so the two extremes keeps changing, keeps switching place sometime. Yeah, keeps switching place and keeps switching in terms of proportions. Yeah, and to understand that eventually it is this balance that we're trying to seek. Yeah, we're trying to come back to an organic state. Yeah, an organic state should be a state which is not contrived. Yeah, it should be natural to you. Yeah, you should come back into that state. And when you come back into that state, you use the least energy, yeah, or no energy. You don't need to use any energy because you have found the most uncontrived state of your being, and therefore you are not in the state of struggle. Yeah, and therefore there is no need for that huge amount of utility of energy. And when then in that state, all energy is conserved. Yeah, all energy is conserved. And when all energy is conserved, it is only nurturing the mind for the purpose of nurturing the mind. Yeah. So in the Taoist understanding, the energy, yeah, it should be conserved for the purpose of nurturing the mind. Yeah. And in terms of the organs, they are looking at how we can cultivate the earth energy that's coming from the kidney. But this kidney energy has to eventually nurture the brain. Yeah, for the purpose of that. Because the meridians are connected. Yeah. And when that happens, then meditation is uncontrived as well. You are not forcing yourself to do a meditation. You are naturally in meditation. Yeah. And when that happens again, whether you are sitting to do meditation, yeah, or just walking, yeah, or talking, or doing anything, yeah, you are always in that state of meditation. Yeah. Because that is where the mind is watching over itself. Yeah. The mind is watching over itself, so it is fully aware of the body, speech, and the activities of the mind. Yeah. So then meditation is alive. Yeah. So many people have the view that meditation is about sitting down. Yeah. But that is just a means for you to enter into that state of meditation. Yeah. When you look back at the Zen history and Zen's teaching, meditation is very much alive. Yeah, you could be cleaning the toilet and you are meditating. Yeah, you could be gardening and you are meditating. You could be, cooking, doing meditation. Yeah, but sitting obviously is important for a beginner. Yeah, to come back to the uncontrived state of the mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and eventually this has to be alive. Yeah, a daily affair. Yeah, moment by moment. Yeah, this has to be extended into a moment by moment. Yeah, and that means that you could move around in space and still be in the state of meditation.
I find it interesting in Japan as a foreign yoga teacher and meeting other foreign yoga teachers that Japanese who have a culture which is famous for meditation seem to seek knowledge from us foreigners, mm-hmm. Even though they could probably walk down the road to the local temple and learn meditation there. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this?
Again, is a process, and this is a path that they have chosen to develop the country. This is a shift in their own culture that we see due to development of the country itself due to the economic advancement. And again, this is what is happening in China today. You know, you couldn't imagine that I go back to China to talk about Chinese medicine, to go back to talk about Chinese philosophy to Chinese people. You know, that was entirely forgotten. You know, every word sounds familiar to them, like the kanji they have heard, but what is that? Like nobody knows. Yeah, and this is what is happening to a society like Japan today. Yeah, there is a big interest, I must say, in Japan for people wanting to do meditation. Yeah, there's a great interest. Everybody wants to know how to do it, how to do it. Yeah, but the question is, are they prepared? Yeah. So one of the key questions is, how prepared is your body to do meditation? The first thing that you have to overcome in the whole learning of meditation is not meditation technique, it's the body. Yeah. If your hips are entirely locked, if there is no flexibility of the lower back, then it's difficult for you to sit properly. It's difficult for you to come into that natural seat. So it is the realization of any wants to learn meditation that they first have to overcome the resistance of this body. Yeah. You see, I learned meditation way before I practiced yoga as a Buddhist practitioner. And even I started practice meditation when I was 18. And even then, I already know that, you know, it was so difficult. And at that point in time, I was young. You know, there's nothing wrong with my joints. But the problem is, every time when I sit for about 10 minutes, my whole leg went numb. And it has no more feeling. No, it was that serious. It's just like entirely numb and no feeling. Thinking to myself that this is really impossible at that point in time. Yeah, being very young at that time. But how is meditation ever going to happen? When I was having this kind of resistance on my body. Yeah. So until I met yoga and I, you know, from not being able to sit in lotus position to being able to sit in lotus position in a very natural way, then I begin to understand that actually the first thing about learning about meditation is to overcome the resistance of the body. And this is why, you know, yin yoga is valuable for anybody that is wanting to learn meditation. The interest, you see, even though Japanese today, they have very little understanding of meditation, and they are still very interested. That is due to a long history of Zen culture here. Yeah. So people are looking to go back into this culture. Yeah, which is a good thing. Especially I see that among the yoga community in Japan, that they are keen interest. So one thing that is encouraging for me is that there is keen interest. Yeah. So the important thing here would be that to slowly, you know, cultivate a body that enables meditations to happen.
That's great. So you're again, and how long are you here for?
I'm in Tokyo this time for about 10 days. There will be 5 days of theory and practice of yin yoga training. This is our basic course. And then there will be another meridian series training. Yeah, this is for people that would like to advance their practice a little bit, you know, and to understand the application of the 5 elements into the practice.
So probably by the time I get this video online, it will be too late for this session, obviously. But how often will you be coming back, and will we have a chance to check out this Korean soon?
I will be back in October. I will be in Kyoto.
Kyoto.
And there will be a conference that I'm teaching at Yoga Smile, and I'm also doing a meridian training in Kyoto, and perhaps some workshops in Kyoto. So that would be the time where I will come back again. And I believe from Kyoto I will be coming back to Tokyo, but I don't know what is happening in Tokyo at that time. You know, we're still planning it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my last final question, what is your favorite Japanese food?
Wow. There's so many, you know, dessert which I shouldn't eat, and I know very well that I shouldn't eat them. Very sweet. I like uncle. This green tea, matcha ice cream. I like all the traditional sweet, like warabi mochi, you know, which I shouldn't eat. But every time when I come back, I couldn't help myself. I need to have something like that. Yeah, so this is my favorite thing is Japanese dessert.